Her name was Captain Sarah Reyes, and the Army had a problem with her, not because she lacked skill, but because she had too much of it. From the moment she sat in the cockpit of an AJ-64 Apache helicopter, something shifted in the air around her. Other pilots felt it. Instructors noted it in whispered remarks. She flew as if the machine were an extension of her own heartbeat, reading wind shifts before the instruments did, threading the aircraft through canyons of smoke and shadow like water finding its course. But despite perfect scores, despite flawless evaluations, the combat mission assignments kept going to the men beside her. The paperwork always found a reason. The commanders always found a delay. Sarah kept flying training sorties while others flew to war, and she smiled through every single briefing, because she had decided long ago that bitterness was a weight she could not afford. But here is what nobody tells you about people who are quietly determined: they do not stop. They simply wait. And if you are still reading this right now, what happens next is the reason this story had to be told. She had grown up in a small New Mexico town where her father, a Vietnam veteran, used to take her to the airfield on Sundays. He never told her she could not fly. He never drew lines around her dreams based on what she was born as. He handed her binoculars and pointed at the sky and said, "Watch how they think. The aircraft doesn't care who's flying it. Only the sky matters." He died before she got her wings. She wore his dog tags to her first solo flight, and she wore them the night everything changed. It was a moonless evening in eastern Afghanistan when the distress call came through. 2 platoons of American soldiers, 43 men, were surrounded in a valley outside Kunar province. The enemy had prepared for weeks. The terrain was brutal, the numbers overwhelming, and the air support that had been assigned to the mission turned back due to mechanical failure. There was one Apache on the flight line still operational. There was one pilot available who had not yet hit her flight hour limit for the week. Sarah Reyes was already walking toward the aircraft before anyone finished reading her name from the roster. Her co-pilot that night was a young warrant officer named James Coffey, 24 years old, 3 months deployed. He strapped in beside her and said nothing when he saw who was at the controls. He had watched her fly for 6 months. He trusted her more than he trusted anything else in that valley. They lifted into the black sky without ceremony, climbing fast and hard toward a fight that nobody expected one helicopter to change. What happened over the next 90 minutes has since been documented in military reports, but no document can capture what it felt like to be on the ground that night, looking up and seeing that Apache hold the line. Sarah flew low and aggressive, threading between ridgelines, using the terrain itself as her weapon, denying the enemy the angles they needed while she systematically, methodically dismantled their positions. She did not panic. She did not hesitate. She called out targets to Coffey in a voice that soldiers on the ground later described as almost unnervingly calm, like someone reading a weather report while standing in a hurricane. Position after position went silent. When her first load of ammunition ran low, she pulled out, reoriented, and came back harder. When a rocket-propelled grenade exploded close enough to rattle every instrument on her panel, she corrected the aircraft, checked Coffey was alive, and continued the engagement. By the time ground forces were able to push through and extract the surrounded platoons, she had flown 6 individual attack runs and eliminated 170 enemy combatants across multiple fortified positions. 43 men walked out of that valley alive. She landed back at base in the gray hour before dawn, shut down the rotors, and sat in the cockpit for a long moment before climbing out. Coffey was already on the tarmac, hands shaking, eyes wet, not saying anything because there were no words available for what he had just witnessed. The crew chief who ran out to meet the aircraft stopped when he saw the damaged shrapnel scoring along the fuselage, a cracked sensor housing, a hydraulic warning light still blinking red. He looked at Sarah, and then he just stepped aside and let her walk past. The way you step aside for something that has earned the ground it stands on. The combat mission restrictions were quietly removed from her record the following week. No ceremony, no formal apology. Just a signature on a form and a new set of assignment orders. She folded them into her breast pocket next to her father's dog tags and said nothing about what had come before. She was not interested in credit. She was interested in the next flight. But those 43 soldiers remembered. On the 1-year anniversary of that night, several of them tracked down her contact information and sent her a handwritten letter signed by every man who had walked out of that valley. The letter said many things, but the line that Sarah read over and over, the one she eventually folded into a small square and kept inside the same pocket as her father's tag, said simply, "We did not know your name before that night. We will never forget it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that quiet persistence is its own kind of power, and that closed doors are sometimes just slow ones, and that the sky has never once asked who is flying, only whether you are willing to rise."